How's everybody doing today? Last night I was having a conversation and it resulted in, I think, a very good question that, we should all ask ourselves, and actually a salient point that I would propose is accurate. But, as individuals, maybe as educators, as leaders, right, as followers, I think it has a lot of applicability. So I wanted to kind of get it out there, see what people thought about it, see who's interested in having these types of conversations, honestly, right? So the topic at hand, right? It's really, what is a good test taker, right? So I've always kind of found this interesting. I've always been on kind of the periphery of this discussion, but I never had it in a detailed way like I had it last night, right? So a lot of us growing up, we are kind of told a good test taker is someone who can understand, how the scoring's done, study appropriately, cram, memorize the right things, what test should I answer, every question, when should I not answer questions that I don't know the answer to, right? And that's kind of what's taught to us as really what constitutes being a good test taker, right? I would propose, though, that it's actually something different and something far more simple, right? Something far more easy to understand, actually, right? So I was having this conversation with somebody and they actually said the words, right? But I took it as really what was my point, and they said, well, I said a good test taker is honestly someone who can walk into any given test, any environment where they've been exposed to content, right? And perform the functions associated with it, right? Whether that's a mental task, which is most tests, but I think it's applicable to, more of a physical test as well, right? And, my friend kind of said, well, that just sounds like a smart person, right? And, we can debate on the word smart, but I took that as my point. I said, yeah, actually, that's exactly what I'm saying. A good test taker is really just someone who's smart, right? Air quotes, smart, right? And what I said, and really, the people we traditionally refer to as good test takers are actually really good at something very different. See, they're good at breaking apart a test, how testing is done, right? And then best expending their energies towards portions of a test or towards specific activities to try and maximize the result as a separate function, as a function of understanding how testing works, separate from being able to perform the task associated with the content that I was actually expected to learn before the test, right? So those are two totally different functions. So actually what that person's good at is reverse engineering a test, right? Understanding the shortfalls of a test's faults, right? Or its upsides or its strong points and weak points. That person would actually be probably a very good test engineer, right? Someone that's creating and designing testing mechanisms. That's what they would be really good at. But it doesn't really speak to the content where there was an expectation for it to be learned and then applied against the exercise or, executing the task in the test itself, right? So it's two kind of totally different things. And so, we go through kind of years or decades, saying, hey, that's a good test taker, when in actuality, really just being a good test taker is really, here's where we can debate smart, but an individual with a high retention rate and then the ability, right, to take what is retained and apply it. That's a good test taker, right? You can probably boil it down and be like, oh, that's just a smart person, right? Well, yeah, maybe not, but it's a lot of it's about retention rate, right? And so, some examples, or some, not necessarily examples, but some ideas I'll throw out. We all have seen those people that they don't get nervous before the test. We know they don't study as hard, but they always pass and they're never nervous, right? So some of those people, might always get an A. They might always have an almost perfect score. A lot of what fits into that category, I would say it's a photographic memory, right? Not all of it, but, a photographic memory, really, now if you're talking about, tests that, you know, are minimal in terms of forcing you to perform a function and execute the task, but where just simply recalling the information is enough to get the question right. You get what I'm saying? So if you had a photographic memory, you really only need to expose yourself to content for a minimal amount of time to get that maximum result, right? So there's individuals that fall into that. Also, that what might fall into that is someone with an extremely high retention rate, right? So they may not necessarily have a photographic memory. So, but their retention rate is actually so high that they're only dropping small portions of the content that they were expected to learn. So they remember almost all of it, right? So, they kind of might fit into that bucket of, man, this dude, or, you know, this girl's always getting an A. I know they don't study as hard as I do. They don't work as hard, but they always get the A, right? A lot of people, where I think most of the people that, you know, like, man, that guy's smart or that girl's smart, is not necessarily an extremely high retention rate, but a high retention rate, right? They can be exposed to the content. They don't necessarily have to study or study in the traditional ways, no flashcards or anything like that. They may utilize the content in conversation or something like that. And they're able to do that because they already begin to retain it, but they retain it even more as they use it and talk about it outside of the context of studying, right? And, you know, maybe I'll do a later video on learning second languages. Maybe I'll do one on that. But, you know, there's a group of people, they may not always get an A. They may get an A a lot. Maybe they get B's and C's, but they always still seem to pass, right? You know, so those people have a high retention rate. So they're retaining that content to a level that they know they're not going to fail. And they may even supplement if they feel like, I don't feel like I've totally grasped it. So they may study a little, maybe, right? But in general, they don't fail at a lot of things, right? It's just not something that happens, right? They would have to be disinterested in the topic or the content, which would lead to them not retaining it as much because they're not, you know, socializing about it, talking about it, having discussions, right? But at the end of the day, you know, they're generally going to, you know, pass, right? And then here's where the honest self-evaluation comes in is most people, right, don't have, you know, high retention rates, right? So really what we've done is, you know, we're testing as a mechanism to measure where people kind of fall in a range of mastery of content. We've kind of morphed it with the acceptance that someone who decomposes the test as a separate function from mastering the content, we've accepted as to be as a good test taker and make it seem like a positive thing. But actually, we are circumventing the actual function of the test itself, right? And so, you know, it's one thing to kind of, you know, get by, but there has to be at some point honest self-evaluation of where do I feel like my retention rate falls, right? And like I said, this has applications throughout life, right? But where do I really fall on a scale of, you know, retention rate? And now, because I'm being honest, what do I do to supplement that, right? Because just doing it for test taking is purely an academic environment. But when you're honest about that, you can now apply that to other aspects of life that, you know, previously you may not even consider you might want to supplement, right? So it's kind of like that guy studies so hard or that girl studies so hard, gets A's, graduates, but really doesn't perform at work. And then, you know, probably another video I might have to do to really speak to the gap and separation between the work environment, whether it's private or public sector, and you know, the educational institution, right? And being able to get through that institution from an academic perspective, but then really what the tests were intended to measure in the first place was your ability to recall, right, and apply what you've learned. And so there's kind of a gap there. But, you know, it was just something I was interested in. I just wanted to kind of put it out there just to see, you know, how much interest these type of discussions could really garner. And then we can talk about more later. Let me know what y'all think.